This program only reflects the personal views of the program host and or the individual contributors.
This is Newsline. I'm Michael Chugani. Tonight, I'm here in Government House with a very special guest, the Chief Executive, Mr. Donald Tsang. Thank you for being on the show. Welcome to the show, Mr. Chief Executive.
Nice to see you again, Michael.
Thank you. Now, let me start with this question. I'm going to go to your campaign slogan of 2.5 years ago. Your slogan was, you were going to get the job done.
Right.
You're halfway through your final term as Chief Executive. Many of your critics in fact say you have failed in getting the job done. Can you look at your critics in the eye and honestly say Hong Kong people are happy with your leadership?
Well, there are two things. First of all, how Hong Kong people feel about my term as a chief executive. I totally respect the views of the people. That's one hand. But then is what I've done in this term of office. I think that is on record. Indeed, during the preparation of this policy address, I tried to catalog them, particularly all the things which I pledged in 2007 during my election campaign and what they have now achieved. For instance, in the major infrastructure projects, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai Macau Bridge,
which many people oppose.
Anyway, of course, every project has its opponents, but the important thing is a general consensus. It must go ahead, and we have got funding from legislature, and we are proceeding with it. And we have the Guangzhou-Shenzhen Hong Kong Express Railway. Again, there's some people object,
That's
correct. And a lot of people believe it must go ahead, and we are going ahead with that. And
you're definitely going to go ahead with that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think the community consensus is very strong. We have to make sure that those who are affected by this particular railway will be compensated in a fair manner. I think that is the only way, the only thing that we have to resolve. Then the Kai Tak Cruise Terminal, the construction of MTR West Island Line, all these things were mentioned as a 10 infrastructure program. They're all proceeding quite smoothly, in my view, looking at it from my point of view.
But if you were, I was asking you, if you were to look the people in the eye, would you say they're happy with your leadership?
Well, that's what the people would say, and I believe that from all the assessment we have, more than half of the people believe that I'm doing a reasonable job.
Are you happy with more than half of the people?
I believe that I want to have more, but then I have to contend with what people have actually assessed me, and that is the only way that any leaders will expect for.
Well, you know what? Sorry, what people can say, a good test, Mr. Chief Executive,
yes.
is this. If you were to ask the people, are you better off today, now, than when you became the Chief Executive? And I don't think
well, that would be very difficult,
would say
Michael.
yes.
I mean, that's very difficult things for them to say. If you ask the question against a backdrop of the worst economic crisis this world has faced since 1930s, it would be very hard put for anyone to say, I'm better off today than I was, say, a year ago or 2 years ago, irrespective of who the leader is. Ask anybody anywhere in the advanced world who will be affected by this financial tsunami. I'm not trying to be complacent and not try to argue out of this very important statement, but just to put it in a proper context. This is what is happening. But despite all that, all I'm saying is we're delivering all the things that we promised to do, and we'll continue to do so. In terms of policy, we have, for instance, secured the timetable for universal suffrage election. We have introduced and successfully introduced a small class teaching, as promised. Minimum wage bill has now been introduced in Legislative Council. And Guangdong and ourselves are developing a green region. Heritage conservation, we have done quite a lot, as you know. Then the consultation, the only thing that we have slowed down is a consultation health care. And that's because of the swine flu.
That's right. And
put it back. Well, we're going to put it back again.
Exactly.
And the competition policy, then during the discussion of the matter, then there were some legal issues that would need to be resolved. Now they seem to be resolved, and we're going to put them back
But the
on the
one
list of
thing you
council.
didn't mention again, Mr. Chief Executive, and that was an accusation against you, was there are people who have fallen below the poverty line. We have increasingly become a society of haves and have-nots. The people are generally not happy. Can you blame them?
Well, I think nobody can, at this stage, because, as I said, while we are still climbing out of the economic recession, and we are not really back to our
We have
original...
1.23 million people living below
No,
the
that's how
poverty
you
line.
assess it. I do not agree with that figure.
You don't agree with that figure?
No. That, if you ask any genuine economists and how figures should be fixed, normally a poverty line in Hong Kong's case is fixed to people with a family income below that of the comprehensive social security system. And you'll find that the figure is considerably less. And in fact, over the last 3 years...
Where would you put that figure, Mr. Chief Executive?
Well, it's well less than 1 million people.
Well less than 1 million?
Well less than 1 million people.
Would you say 500,000 people?
No. You wanted these figures, and we can give you a whole piece on how this will be discussed, in fact, how it will be devised. And more important, there have been significant improvement over the years. But there was then a fallback in 2009 because of the Asian financial crisis. I'm not being complacent. What I'm suggesting is something we need all to strive for. In a capitalist society, there is always a difference between the income level gap, and that appears in this city, in New York, and in London, or New Delhi, or in Singapore, anywhere for that matter, in Tokyo. But what we need to do is make sure the poor will not continue to remain poor. There is a social progression for people, and there are ample opportunities in the community to enable young people to climb up the social ladder. And in order to do that, you must have educational facilities. You must also have an equal society. I think we do have those things in Hong Kong.
Okay, now I want to move on to something that happened recently, just a few days after your policy speech on Wednesday, and something everybody thought would be just a minor issue has become a major issue, and that is your plan for cash coupons to encourage people to buy energy-saving light bulbs. Now, it's now since been revealed, or it's come out, that your son's father-in-law owns a light bulb business and therefore will benefit from this scheme. It's become a big issue. Do you blame people in Hong Kong for being suspicious of this government?
Well, I think it's important for us, if questions are asked, and we're able to answer them, and there is no foul play, and there's no iniquities involved. In this case, Mr. Mok, who's father of my daughter-in-law, sells electrical goods, and everyone knows about that. He sells both these compact fluorescent lamps and as well as the incandescent light bulbs. And during the preparation of the policy address, we keep it a strictly confidential exercise. Nobody outside the circle knew anything about it, least of all Mr. Mok. So he knew nothing about it until, of course, I announced in Legislative Council. The idea came from Edward Yao, our Secretary for Environment, quite rightly so. Whole idea is looking at the issue from the point of view of public interest. What is the public advantage in this? And it has been pointed out to me that many advanced economies, in fact, are abolishing the use of incandescent lamps.
I don't think anybody argues with the idea itself, Mr. Chief Executive. The fact is people are suspicious. Why do you think they're suspicious?
Well, people in Hong Kong must be suspicious. Everyone would be. Do you think any society that would trust the leaders just implicitly? And there are also people who want to find fault with it, with their leaders.
Your political foes?
Well, I do not mean political foes, anyone. And in fact, any newspaper, for instance, we want to make sure that there's no, as they said, corruption, foul play involved. And
are we oversensitive about this?
Well, in Hong Kong, we are a very open society. We do ask questions. I think it would be the responsibility of the person concerned, the people concerned, to explain what it's all about, and there is nothing unjust.
So you don't mind that this has come up and you're under suspicion?
Well, the point is, Michael, to tell you honestly, I do not mind, but my family suffers a lot as a result. But that's
how did they suffer?
Well, suddenly you find yourself in a newspaper implicated that you think you can make a profit out of a public policy. That hurts a lot.
Have they called you to express their unhappiness?
Well, I don't. Mr. Mok is a very decent person. I personally feel exceedingly embarrassed. I think he and his family, including my son and my daughter-in-law, suffered enormously over the last day.
Okay, well, we'll leave it there. And now I just want to ask you one more question before we go to a break.
Of course, you have to understand, as I said, Mr. Mok sells both incandescent lights and the fluorescent lamp. He may able, as a result of this policy, at the end of the day, sell more the compact lamps, but he is going to lose his business.
Sure, of course. So you could see it that way. Yes, right. Now, I just wanted to ask you, before the commercial break, I just want to ask you one question. You talked of big markets and big market, small government in your speech, yet you won't interfere with property prices. You don't want to interfere with property prices. But does that mean you agree with the preposterous prices some developers are demanding for luxury apartments? It's like monopoly money.
Well, that's not for me to say as far as how transactions are being held and what sort of money being changing hands, provided it's all legally conducted.
But you must think it's too much.
You must give me a chance to answer the questions, okay? I think it's excessive, if I say so. Totally, to me, this is obscene in a way. The sudden rise in the pricing of transaction of one or two penthouses in a new development. But what is important from a chief executive point of view and from an administration point of view is whether it will impact on the pricing of the mass market. And for that reason, we are watching and monitoring the market quite carefully. There are, of course, what we're looking at what we call the contagion effect, whether it will affect the properties lower down. The fact remains that the pricing at the moment for most residential lots are quite reasonable. Looking at historically, looking at people's how people are able to afford them, and looking at the price level compared with the peak level, say in the last quarter of 1997, and particular availability of domestic dwellings all over Hong Kong, not necessarily the only place in Conduit Road. So I'm concerned, and therefore I'm monitoring the system closely. And of course, we have policy instruments to deal with that, but we have to be very, very careful. Okay. I must remind myself there are 1.2 million homeowners in Hong Kong who will be very unhappy and very angry if they feel that because of a government policy, the value of the property immediately falls.
Okay, we'll take a quick break. More of Newsline in just a moment. Please don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Newsline, and I've got the Chief Executive, Mr. Donald Tsang, here with me. Mr. Chief Executive, you've said a lot about the poverty, poor people in Hong Kong. I just want to, you did not offer any relief in your policy speech a few days ago, and you did also say that that is an issue that the Financial Secretary, it's for him to deal with, handing out relief to people and so on. We discussed about poor people in Hong Kong. You disagree that we have got 1.2 million poor people, as some surveys have found. You say it's a lot less. But those people will still be here in the next few months when the Financial Secretary delivers his budget. Surely he needs to help them.
Well, we have got a reasonable regime for helping our underprivileged in Hong Kong, from comprehensive social security, health care, housing, education, care for the elderly, and so on, which is a very comprehensive scheme. It's non-contributory for that matter. And of course, it's not perfect. There's nothing like perfect system. But I think we do a reasonable thing. Over the last 18 months or so, because of the financial tsunami, we gave a lot of additional handouts, double pay, waiver from rents, and all sorts of things. I believe for the purpose of policy address, I should not deal with those issues. We must look at a longer term.
Will the FS deal with it?
Well, whether the FS deal with it depends on the fiscal position at the time. But the fact of the matter, as I said, we have got a reasonable regime.
So you don't think you need to give out any more relief?
When we have the resources to do it, we should continue to improve the system, making sure our poor will be helped, particularly those who need help. But in my policy address, Michael, don't forget I have put a lot of words on how we help the elderly, particularly the provision of more elderly home, buying more elderly places, ensure that they have a decent life. I also talk about how we deal with the psychiatric patients who need additional care, particularly those who are now recuperating at home, and also talk about those who are physically handicapped, particularly those groups who believe that we might be lacking. But that's why policy issues, I believe, are proper content for policy address. Otherwise, in terms of resource allocation, it is really a matter for the Financial Secretary to consider.
Okay, well, we'll see what he does. Now, I just want to move on to democracy. This is going to be a biggest issue, democracy, in the months ahead. As expected, the Democrats are furious that you are insisting that they must wait for a democracy roadmap. For now, you will only deal with reforms for the 2012 elections. I'm sure a lot of people want to know, is that decision your decision, or is it Beijing's decision that we will not have a roadmap now?
That was a collective decision. We went through that together, Michael. First of all, we started with 2005, when we put up what I consider to be a reasonable package for reform. But that was rejected, despite there was some majority support for it in the community by the legislators. In that, not all of them. Of course, I did not get 2/3, a majority on that occasion. On one particular ground, and that was we did not have a timetable. So in my election campaign that followed in 2007, I made it a point I would strive my very best to secure that. And fortunately, in December 2007, we got a timetable that we're going to have universal suffrage election for the chief executive in 2017, and that for the legislature in 2020. But for 2012, the regime should be as follows. He set it out in general terms. Particularly, there should not be a change to the 50-50 percentage point between the functional constituency seats and the directly elected seats. And the present system should continue. But within that, we could then make further changes. And that would be the framework for change for 2012. My job now is to make sure that within that framework, we should be able to advance further from the present electoral arrangement to make that arrangement more democratic, more open.
But why don't you give them a roadmap? If there's going to be elections in 2017 and 2020.
The point is, there is a procedure we have to go through. First of all, the present remit is for us to discuss only 2012. If we want to go to do 2017 and 2020, in terms of legally, we have to go back to National People's Congress Standing Committee.
And you have said...
And you have to trigger that. That's one procedural point. And then the second point is practicality. Just look at the practical point of view. Even getting a consensus on an improvement program is not easy to achieve. Just look at the experience we had in 2005. So it will be very, very difficult already on present situation to secure the 2/3 majority on the issues related to 2012. If you bring in the additional elements of 2017 and 2020, embracing such contentious issues like abolition of functional constituencies and so on and so forth.
You feel you don't have the time to do it?
We don't have any chance at all for securing a consensus for even for 2012, but that's the matter.
You know, you said, Mr. Chief Executive, and I'm going back to what you said a few days ago. You said it would be, your words, a mission impossible to get Beijing to change its mind about pushing democracy, universal suffrage forward. We're going to have it in 2017 and 2020, as you pointed out. The Democrats want it in 2012. And you said it is mission impossible to get Beijing to change its mind. Now, I know that lots of people here feel that Beijing may not think Hong Kong is ready for democracy yet. Hence, you've got 2017 and 2020.
Yes.
But I want to ask you this, Mr. Chief Executive, can you tell the Hong Kong people, you yourself at least, think they are ready for democracy now?
Well, the people are mature people. But democratization in the electoral system needs time to mature. And that is experienced in every place.
So we're not ready yet?
Well, I'm not saying we are not ready. But the fact of the matter is we need consensus. In the case of special administrative region, the consensus must be built up upon agreement of the people of Hong Kong, the legislators in Hong Kong and the National People's Congress in Beijing. And that is the sort of assignment that we are given. And what we have now, we have gone through a lot of stages as regards the election process in 2012. And as bringing it forward, what I describe as Mission Impossible is because that issue was raised before. In 2007, I did put to the central government all the people's views, including the clamoring and the request for universal suffrage from some sectors of the community for that to take place in 2012. And considering that factor and all the other points, then we came to the solution, well, the decision. The decision is we're going to have it in 2017 for chief executive and 2020 for the legislature. In other words, we canvassed that issue before thoroughly with central government. So what
you're saying is that it is not that we are not ready for democracy now. You feel that we don't have the time to reach a consensus.
We can only be ready for democracy when the system allows it. The system here, as I said, Michael, demands the agreement of three parties concerned.
So it's the agreement that's delaying us, not the fact that we're not ready for democracy.
This is a personal perception. I do not want to go into that. It's what my personal opinion, whether it's ready or not, or your opinion, whether it's ready or not. But it is the collection of the three parties involved, when is the best time to do this.
Okay, now what the Democrats have said is if you don't get them a roadmap, they're all going to resign. En masse, 23 legislators. That is going to create a shock to the political system in Hong Kong. Will you give in to their threats?
Well, this is not for me to say. It's a decision for them to make. And all I can say is I feel exceedingly sad. The most important thing for us in advancing democracy here is to persevere. Now we have a timetable. We have to make sure that we are going to deliver it. And 2017, if I may say so, in political history is a very short time. And we have to work hard on how we should make it work for Hong Kong. We just cannot just clone the system elsewhere and put it over here. So it is a thing we need to work hard. And at the same time, we make sure, meanwhile, we have got some advancement, and significant advancement, I hope, in 2012. And so I'm afraid we have to do it deliberately, do it conscientiously, and do it methodically. We should, first of all, get the system improved for those two sets of elections in 2012, then work on the nitty-gritty of universal suffrage election in 2017. And then that goes on. Okay. And that's the way we should process it.
Okay, I've got two more questions. We're running out of time. Just the other day, you were in LegCo, 2 days in a row. The members of the League of Social Democrats, they behaved terribly. They threw things at you, and they did all kinds of things. They insulted you. Do you find it hypocritical that people pushing for democracy and they behaved this way in the name of democracy? They won't even let you have your say. Do you find that hypocritical? Well,
I find it abominable, and I feel very sad. That's all, very sad. In that the legislature in Hong Kong has a tradition of civil behavior throughout, and we're able to transact business in a rational fashion. We may disagree, and we often disagree, but we do it in a civil manner. And there's no need for what I call abominations of this kind.
Would you find it hypocritical that the Democrats would not say, all right, the three of you stop doing that?
Well, there's a value load.
The so-called pro-Beijing members did that, but the Democrats didn't join them. Do you find that hypocritical?
Well, I think I do not want to use an adjective of that kind, but I just look, because that comes from a first subjective judgment. From my point of view, I just find it very, very sad.
Okay, I'm going to have one last question. I've run out of time here. On the day when you're delivering your speech, the Democrats had this placard there saying, bow tie, keep your promise. Everybody calls you bow tie. Do you like being called bow tie?
Don't mind at all.
Why don't you mind being called bow tie?
Because I wear bow ties.
Do you find it an insulting name?
No, why should it be? Is bow tie insulting? I don't think it should be. I mean, I like it.
Okay. Then I'm going to ask you one very quick question. You're going to be running out of time soon. SCE, do you
well, two and a half years is not a very short time.
Okay, well, do you have any idea of what the next chief executive should be like?
He'll be very intelligent, very well endowed, and very gifted person.
Okay. Thanks for watching Newsline. See you next week. Good evening.